If there's this quiet thought in the back of your mind that says, if I don't stay on top of this, everything's going to fall apart, and you're calling that responsibility, you're calling that maturity, heck, maybe you're even calling it obedience. I'm just going to go ahead and call it what it actually is. That's fear, my friend, and you might not be trusting God as much as you think you are. Hello, welcome back to Karin with an I, Build Bold. I'm Karin, and welcome to episode 2. Last week, we talked about identity before influence, and today we're talking about obedience, but not obedience rooted in pressure, not obedience rooted in fear, obedience rooted in trust, because obedience rooted in trust dwells. So that word dwell, I told you I'm a word nerd, right? So I looked it up, and the Hebrew word for dwell is yashub. I hope I'm saying that right. It means to sit, to remain, to settle, and to inhabit, to make your home somewhere. And I've been sitting with that word dwell. And as I've been sitting with it, I realized something, that there was a season of my life where I thought I was living in obedience, but I wasn't dwelling. I was bracing. We've been talking about survival mode, and I wish I could tell you that I have this, this survival mode, default mode conquered. I don't. It literally is my default mode. Whenever I am in a stressful situation or whenever I become afraid, I default to this survival mode. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? Why is this the first place my brain jumps to, where I feel like everything depends on me and I have to start saving the situation? I was unpacking this, and by literally the grace of God, he started bringing things to mind. And I started talking with people. I started talking with my mom. We had some really interesting conversations about my childhood. I realized that I had to learn responsibility really, really early. I shared with you that my mom has this condition, this disease, and she had it for all of my childhood. She's had it her whole life. She got diagnosed when she was 16. Then she had me. And as she got older, it worsened. The condition worsened. And I never really knew a healthy mom. And I became a caregiver very, very early. I learned cooking. I learned all the cleaning. And because I was also the oldest sibling in my family, naturally, just more fell on me. Um, by the time I could drive, I was running errands, I was grocery shopping. My brother was only 15 months younger than me, but I had my license first, and so I was his chauffeur anytime he needed to go anywhere. Um, and I'm not saying this like to be dramatic. It was just things needed to be done. And I don't think I really complained about, taking care of my mom, like in a why me type of way. I mean, I was capable and I was dependable. So I did it. And my mindset was like, well, if not me, then who else would do it? And somewhere in that season, without anyone meaning to, I started believing something dangerous. My home and my security depends on me. My dad's at work. He's doing what he needs to do. He takes over when he can. But I'm the oldest. My mom needs a female to help with most things, and I'm her daughter, so of course. Plus, I need my mom. I love my mom. Keeping her alive was not an option. It 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 was just about security for me. It's my mom. And just so you know, I'm not being dramatic when I say we were keeping her alive. My mom's disease, by the time I was 16, 17, her lungs were deteriorating so bad. Um, she was on many liters of oxygen that went in her nose, and then we had liquid oxygen covering her mouth and going in two different ways. Um, the anxiety I would have every time she would have a coughing attack was taking its toll on my mental health. But I think I just absorbed and pushed it down because I needed to be the strong one. Um, as I was writing this episode and reflecting on this part of my life, I realized that the enemy started whispering identity lies to little Karin at age 11, 12, 13. And she started believing something then that she would have to unlearn later. I was learning that my security and the security of others depended on me. That was a lie. When I was 17, a miracle happened. And after being on the organ donor list, we got a call from the hospital that there were a pair of lungs waiting for my mom, and she was prepared for her double lung transplant that day. Um, she was so sick that we didn't even know if she would survive the trip to the hospital, but it was just like miracle after miracle where God just gave her a miraculous day of health. Kind of like when I was born, right? She never felt healthier when she was pregnant with me. Well, she was just having like one of the best breathing days on the trip to the hospital that day. Um, and when she was prepped for surgery and the doctors took her in and she went under and the doctor said when they went to lift the lungs out of her chest, that the lungs basically just disintegrated in their hands. And they were in shock and just questioned, like, how the heck was she breathing with these things? Um, I mean, I know how. The story of my mom's health and the transplant is just such another big God story that I heard growing up. But that's my mom's story. That's not my story. So I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole. Though, let me tell you, our God is a God of miracles. And I've just witnessed through my mom's life just how big he is. But after my mom's lung transplant, there was so much relief in our family. Um, but there was also a lot of uncertainty because recovery was not going to be simple. And it was going to be just another season of trial for our whole family. Um, so she basically had to learn how to breathe on her own all over again. And until she could, she had to have, like a tracheotomy and a ventilator breathing for her. Because, and on top of it, she still had her disease. Um, and just from the surgery and everything, her body was just so weak. But after all of that happened, after the surgery, and we knew like she was in the clear, she was going to be okay. My brother was gone with his friends for the rest of the summer. And I had gotten a job with my dad in the city because, Karin, she's the responsible one. Fun was for other people. Um, I just did not feel responsible to just leave for the summer with such a sick mom. Joy was for kids without responsibility. I had, however, signed up to go on a missions trip with my youth group to Mexico before, we knew how bad my mom was going to be. But that night before I was supposed to leave, I was packing and I started to have this panic attack. Like I said, my brother was gone. So my mom was at the hospital in recovery. So it was just me and my dad at home. And I remember sitting with my dad and just crying with him and telling him how uncomfortable I felt leaving the country. I wanted to stay close to home. there was just too much going on. And I was asking him if he could please call my leaders and tell them that I'm not going. I'm not sure at the time if I could even name really what was going on with me mentally. I know now, but that's why I'm able to tell this story. But as a 17-year-old, I just knew I can't leave and I'm super anxious about it. And I was just panicking. But I think my dad and all the leaders at the time figured it out because he started like giving me, permission to go. Um, he told me that I didn't have to carry this anymore and I could trust the doctors, I could trust God, and that I deserved to have like a little fun that summer. Um, but I didn't end up going. I think I compromised. Instead, I chose to go serve with my friends at a summer camp closer to home. The same place where my brother was, somewhere familiar, somewhere I was known, and that I could still get frequent updates. Just in case something went wrong with my mom, or if I did decide I wanted to go home, it was just a quick trip. It was just somewhere I think I could still feel in control. I gave myself permission to choose something for me, but I still didn't release the outcome. That was all I knew how to do in that moment. Be responsible, be dependable, and be the one holding it all together. But if I'm honest, even then, I was not fully trusting God. I was managing it from a distance. And I think just what we were talking about last episode, right? Letting go just felt irresponsible. I didn't know how not to be the strong one. That wiring followed me for the rest of my life. It followed me into my single motherhood with my 2 babies when I had no financial stability and a brand new business. It fueled my survival mode. And being the strong one, um, I think I took pride in it. It didn't feel unhealthy. It just felt necessary. And it worked. Late nights editing, middle of the night feedings with business podcasts playing in the background. I was, always learning, always producing. I never really had any breakdowns. Chaos was at a minimum. I was a very strict mother with schedules and napping and um I would even get compliments, Karen, you're doing great. You're so strong. But subconsciously, I was whispering, if I don't do this, everything is going to fall apart. And you can't slow down. You don't have margins for mistakes. You don't get to fall apart because if you do, there's no backup plan. But I never asked myself why I couldn't rest. I never asked why slowing down felt so unsafe. And I never asked why delegating even, felt a little bit threatening. Because deep down, if I wasn't holding it all together, who was? God later led me to a season while building my business after I became my own worst enemy. And he exposed all of these control issues where I had to unlearn all of this wiring. But he refined me by teaching me what obeying out of trust looked like instead. So if there's this quiet thought in the back of your mind that says, if I don't stay on top of this, everything's going to fall apart, and you're calling that responsibility, you're calling that maturity, heck, maybe you're even calling it obedience. I'm just going to go ahead and call it what it actually is. That's fear, my friend, and you might not be trusting God as much as you think you are. I know because I lived it. Okay, so there are 2 kinds of obediences. We're going to get into them. The first one is fear-based obedience. Fear-based obedience braces. Okay, it says, don't drop the ball. Don't let anyone down. Don't rest. Don't trust someone else to handle it. Stay alert. Stay tight. It keeps one hand on the outcome. It might even obey, but never truly releases. Here's what's tricky. Fear-based obedience can look incredibly disciplined. You wake up early, you get it done, you show up, you sacrifice. No one will look at you and say, she doesn't trust God. But trust is not proven by activity. Trust is proven when you're able to release. And I wasn't releasing anything. I was obeying God, but I was also insuring myself just in case. That's not trust. That's contingency planning. Okay, so that's fear-rooted obedience. The second kind is identity-rooted obedience. This is so different. It says, do what God asked and let Him be God, which means you are not. But here's the difference, okay? It still works. It still shows up. It still sacrifices, right? We're not saying not to be responsible and just sit on your butt and do nothing, right? But then after you do what you are supposed to do, we're still working hard. You put in a good day's work, and then it dwells. It doesn't keep checking her phone. You know what I mean? It rests in the promises of who God is and what He says He will do, without meddling and without trying to control. Obedience that dwells. And we talked about that word dwell, to sit in, to find safety in, to build your home in. Because why? You trust that that place you built your home in is safe. Obedience that dwells is obedience rooted in trust. Last episode, I told you that when my marriage ended, I wasn't destroyed. And that's true. My identity in Christ held. I knew who I was. But knowing who you are and living from that place consistently are two different things. Your identity can be secure while trust is still being refined. Where my problem was that I didn't believe that He was my dwelling place. And this is the truth that's going to be forging us today. I'm so excited for this. It comes from Psalm 91. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. Okay, so he who dwells in the shelter of the Most High. He who dwells. That word dwell means to remain, right? We said to settle, sit, to make your home somewhere, not visit where you're desperate, not check in when things are falling apart. We live there. Dwell means you've decided where your safety comes from. And for a long time, I hadn't. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High. Okay, the next word, shelter, means you don't have to stand in the storm. You don't have to scan the horizon. You don't have to brace for impact. And you don't have to anticipate what might happen because you are covered. And if I'm honest, I didn't know how to feel covered. I knew how to feel responsible. I knew how to stay alert. And I knew how to stay ready. But I did not know how to dwell in a shelter. Next part of the verse, will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. To abide in someone's shadow means you have to stay really, really close to someone, to stay near enough to remain in it. A shadow covers you because something stronger stands between you and the light. That means that I don't have to be the thing standing in front of the threat. I don't have to cast my own shadow of protection. I just have to stay close enough to the one who does, God Almighty. Then verse 2, I will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. Okay, refuge is where you run when you're overwhelmed. A fortress is what stands between you and what's coming. And here's the part that confronted and comforted me at the same time. If He is my fortress, I don't get to be one. You can't be both. And I had spent years trying to be the fortress, trying to be the dependable one, the strong one, the shield, the backup plan. And Psalm 91 gently says, you don't have to be. It doesn't promise there won't be attacks. It doesn't promise that there's not going to be trials and troubles of all shapes and sizes. It says you do not have to fear them. It says they won't own you. Trust doesn't eliminate uncertainty. It eliminates panic authority. And when we read Psalm 91 now, it eliminates all pressure, problem solving, and dependability. When I read it, I hear permission. Permission to stop scanning the horizon, permission to stop sleeping with one eye open, and just permission to dwell and rest. Some of you are exhausted because you're trying to be the shelter and the fortress for everyone else, including yourself. Motherhood, marriage, business, leadership, and you're gripping, you're managing, you're over functioning, and it might look faithful, but it's fear dressed up as responsibility. Obedience rooted in trust, what? What does it do? It dwells. It works from security, not for it. I'm going to say that again. It works from security, not for it. We have a lot on our plates, ladies. We carry a lot, and we are capable of a lot. We are strong. Our families know it, and they're depending on us for a lot. Our kids are depending on us all the time. Some of us are caregivers for our parents. If you're working outside of the home, you have careers to juggle, or you're building your business. You might have a team of people depending on you. Your spouse is depending on you to manage the home. Maybe you're the one in your extended family, and everyone is depending on you to manage conflict. If you're in ministry, your church is depending on you. And we can be doing all of that. And on the outside, we're doing it with a smile, and we've got this. But the truth is, you were never created to be the fortress. You were created to dwell in one. You were never created to control everything. You only do it to feel safer. I understand how risky trust feels when people are counting on you. But control has a ceiling, and you will reach it. Your strength will max out. Your nervous system will eventually say enough. Not because you're weak, but because you were never designed to carry out what only God can carry out. You don't have to break to prove that. You don't have to burn out to learn that. And I'm not talking about quitting or abandoning the responsibility God has given you. But stop trying to be the thing holding it all together. Let Him be the fortress. You just focus on staying in the shelter. That is obedience rooted in trust. And that kind of obedience dwells. So let me ask you, what have you assumed is yours to hold together? Is it your child's future? Your husband's growth? Your business revenue? Your reputation? Your family's peace? What are you managing that God never assigned to you? And here's the one that might hit a little deeper. What are you afraid will happen if you stop being the strong one? If you stop overfunctioning? If you stop anticipating? If you stop solving before you're asked? If you stop holding it together, what do you believe will break? And underneath that, who do you think is actually responsible for holding it up? And this is the uncomfortable question, but it really, really matters. Are you trusting God with the outcome? Or are you just asking him to bless your control? Those are not the same thing. Trust says, you're God, and I'll obey and release. But control says, I'll obey, but I'm keeping one hand on the steering wheel. Psalm 91 doesn't say, she who manages everything will be secure. It says, he who dwells. She who dwells. Dwelling means you stop pacing. It means you stop scanning. It means you let God be the fortress and you stay in the shelter. You don't have to answer these perfectly, but don't skip them. Because if you want to start seeing obedience rooted in trust, it begins with honesty. And this week, before you fix it, before you manage it, before you brace, pause. Ask yourself, am I obeying from fear, or am I dwelling in trust? Because obedience rooted in trust, say it with me, dwells. Stay with him. Let him be your shelter. So what happens when you start obeying and really start owning this identity thing? Well, I'll tell you, the enemy starts to notice. So next week, guess what we're talking about? We're talking about spiritual warfare and how the enemy likes to use shame and isolation as a strategy against your identity. I can't wait to talk about it with you guys. If something from today's episode resonated with you, you have a story you would like to share or questions, I genuinely would love to hear from you. You can email me at karenwithani.pod@gmail.com, or if you want to stay connected outside of the podcast, you can find me over on Instagram. I share more behind the scenes, conversations, and updates there. You can listen to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, or for the full experience, you can watch every episode on Spotify and YouTube. It would mean so much to us if you would like, follow, subscribe, and share. You can leave a comment and give us a review. Interact with the show wherever you can. Honestly, it's the best way you can support the show and help the message reach other listeners like you. We will see you next week. Go build bold.